Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Welcome home again to another home remodeling project in the Berkshire Hills in western Massachusetts. We're at Elm Court here in the town of Lenox, and it's a house that's undergoing restoration at the hands of the fifth-generation owners. It's the largest shingle-style house in America, and today we'll take a look at the exterior detailing of the house, as well as the restored library, even the heating system. Stick around. It's good to have you home again. Bob Burley is the fifth generation of the family that built this house back in 1886. And as I understand it, the house was locked up by your grandfather in 1957.
That's correct. After 50 years of the family living in the house as a summer house, it expanded, started at about 20,000 square feet.
Right.
And a series of 5 or 6 additions over the next 30-year period resulted in a house that's now about 70,000 square feet.
The biggest shingle-style house in America. And the shingle style obviously is defined by a skin of wooden shingles that runs throughout it. And here we have an opportunity to see how that shingle style evolved so that it includes other types of detailing like Tudor timberwork.
Almost a Tudor-like timberwork, that's correct. The architects were Peabody and Stearns. And they also oversaw every addition to the house. And so the main portion of the house from the original, you can see the wavy type shingle work there.
In that gable end up there.
Yes, and as the style evolved, other elements were included in the style. For example, the almost toothy look of the shingle design there.
The gables everywhere, and of course, something like a French turret there. What would that have been?
Amusingly, that was a fire watch. I think once you had a house that was about 70,000 square feet, you were concerned that it's made out of wood, and if it did catch fire, it wouldn't take long to be gone. And so 24 hours a day, there was somebody who was in that turret watching the roofs for fire, and there was a counterpart on the ground who walked around and also looked for fire.
Amazing story. I'm sure there are a lot of amazing stories. Now, what about a fountain like this one in the middle of the drive here?
This was actually a copy of a fountain from Piazza Mattei in Rome. The original fountain's only 4 feet tall, and we assume the Fountain of the Turtles was seen on vacation, and they wanted to build it here. They built it about, 20 times bigger than the original.
They enlarged it. And of course, during the 50 years that the house was closed up, it suffered from theft, vandalism, and a lot of borrowing, so that the bronzes that were once there have disappeared.
That's correct. And remember, Bob, this was the era of horse-drawn carriages.
Right, so that the coaches would arrive here under the porte-cochere, and this would be the main entrance to the cottage.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And at the time that this house was built, some of my great-great-grandparents' relatives were building things like the Biltmore in North Carolina, the Breakers in Newport, among others.
The Vanderbilts had a penchant for large summer cottages.
They like to entertain a little bit.
Yeah, and so this one in many ways is the most modest of all the houses that were built.
Well, I think it reflects more of a country aspiration than some of the others, and great attention was put not only into the house, but also how it fits into the land. And certainly Frederick Law Olmsted everywhere took that in mind.
Olmsted being the designer of Central Park in New York and of many of the settings for the great estates of the late 19th century. Now, this is the back side. Well, the house doesn't really have a back side. It has important facades everywhere you go. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing along here.
Well, this side of the house faced what was a tennis court, but more notably, the house was named after a tree, an elm tree, that was 300 years old at the time the house was built, and was the first house to be wired for lightning protection.
Interesting.
Another thing of note is that the Elm Court talks in 1919 were held on the porch here.
After the end of World War I.
That's correct. And those discussions led to the drafting of the Treaty of Versailles and the creation of the League of Nations.
And what about the far side of the house, the western terrace?
The western elevation was the last portion of the building to be built and does show the somewhat classic style of the shingle style, and then it was a melding in a true American style of many influences, as you mentioned before, Tudor and obviously all the shingle work.
Spectacular. Can we go inside?
Absolutely.
Next, we'll meet Sonia Burley and talk about the ongoing interior restoration at Elm Court.
Bob, I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Sonia.
Hello.
Hello, hi, Bob.
How are you?
Wonderful, nice to meet you.
Thank you, thank you. Boy, what a front hall you've got.
Oh, gosh, well, thank you, yes.
Now, Sonia, I've got to ask a question. I mean, both of you are so young. How do you get into home renovation at this scale when you're somebody practically in your 20s?
Oh, gosh, well, honestly, on some levels, I think it's hardwired into both of us.
Is that right?
It is. The preservation of land and of houses is very important to us. And we really enjoy the aspects of the hands-on learning as well as the academic approach for research. And it's so fulfilling. It's really
Interesting.
fulfilling.
You started out your marriage in New Orleans, right?
We did. We were trying to purchase some of the worst-looking houses that you could find, if you listen to some people. But we found some great properties that were awfully down on their luck. Some apartments condemned. And we just had a great time working together and solving the problems that each house presented.
Okay.
That was the start.
And so here the two of you are working on something that really has meaning. Yes. Let's look at some of the features of this front hall, because really it's extraordinary. The fireplace, what can you tell us about this?
Well, I love the style. The overall style, it's just these very beautiful, delicate birds. Over here, we have a fig tree. And it's very interesting because the material used to construct this is brownstone, and that's usually an exterior building material.
Well, but this is a fireplace that you can have an interior and an exterior.
Yes, that's true.
This is enormous.
Well, and we can, sitting here, it's so comforting. We actually toast marshmallows here a lot.
I bet you do.
Kids love it.
Yeah.
They do.
Now,
they really do.
As we were just discussing, the house was vandalized and abandoned for 50 years. These look like they've been here forever.
Yes, and these actually...
The andirons.
These are original to the house.
So some things were preserved or saved?
They were. When the vandalism first started, my grandparents did move some things into their house, and my mother has worked awfully hard, and other members in the family, to bring things back to the house. And that's really been great. I mean, to have the original, the original things.
Very, very important. Yes. And of course, this, which is 8 feet by maybe 5 or 6 feet by a good 4.5 feet deep, wouldn't probably draw very well without that massive iron backboard.
That's the key to the fireplace.
Really?
It has those beautiful Rococo scrolls on the back, and so it's also very, very nice to look at.
So I'd say this hall is maybe 35 feet by about 25 feet, something like that?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
What condition was this room in?
Well, all the glass had been broken out. There were boards on all of the windows. The floors were just filled with debris. The wood, the paneling had been knocked out. Just some senseless vandalism.
Senseless vandalism. Are there any photographs of the interiors?
We do have some great pictures, or not great pictures, good pictures of the
documentation.
Yeah, well, they clearly give you an idea of what it was like. Yeah. And the ceilings, I mean, these are massive coffered ceilings. They're really beautiful to look at. What kind of shape were they in?
They were actually out of reach in some ways, we think, from some of the vandalism, just because they're higher. It certainly didn't sustain the damage that a lot of the walls and the spindles in the stairwell and the doors did.
But why do you suppose they knocked the panels out?
We think they were treasure hunting. There were all the stories, not only locally, but throughout New England, that the house was haunted, that somebody had put money in the walls, and all the things that happen when houses are left idle.
Yeah.
And so we've spoken with people who many years ago had broken in, but now say, oh, well, I was...
Just a kid. Yeah, interesting. In half a century, there's a lot of stories like that. Well, what have you, it's nice and warm in here. Besides the fireplace, what have you done about the mechanical systems?
I'd love to show you the basement.
Oh, good.
Oh, well, and maybe when you come back, I could show you the library.
Sounds like a plan.
Right. Good.
Great. When we come back, we'll be down in the basement, checking out the state-of-the-art heating plant. Well, I'd say there's a little bit of decay evident in your basement, Bob.
Well, there was. With the building vacant for 50 years...
Half a century.
There was 4 feet of snow in the basement. The first winter that we came, it was blowing in like snow fences, all these interior walls.
Really? So that explains the heaving of the slabs down here. How big is the basement?
It's about 34,000 square feet.
Say it again. Wow, 34,000 square feet.
One of the most interesting features of the basement is that there's a walkway underneath the front porch when we came in. And of course, historically, there was a butcher's shop and a baker's shop and a laundry room and actually 2 bakers, drying racks. It was like a little city.
This was a hotel. I mean, this was a private house, but how many rooms in the house?
There's 106 rooms in the house.
And a staff of probably 20 or 30.
The total staff was 128.
For the whole property?
For the whole property, and I think about 20 or 30 in the house,
wow. Yeah. And then, this is kind of a contrast, because everything overhead looks like it's brand new piping. Troughs like you see I mean, this is state of the art. Why did you wire things like this?
Well, it's an interesting, some of the problems we had with the house led to our ultimate advantage in that none of the systems were usable except for the septic drains. We had great electricians, Wilbur Electric, who installed these troughs, which meant we weren't drilling holes in beams, we weren't putting up conduit. We have high voltage on the top, low voltage here.
And you've got access to it at any point.
Continual
without
access.
having to go into and breaking into it. So it's new technology and old technology. You still have the coal pile in there, huh?
You're welcome to take some home. We're trying to get it out of the basement slowly, but haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah. And now you use fuel oil.
We do. We use oil burners. But historically, this was what the boiler looked like.
Now, that's original, right?
That's an original boiler. There were 3, and there were...
there were 3 this size
3
for the
that
whole
size
place.
For the whole place. And there were a few people who were continuously feeding it with coal, which I imagine was not a very good job to have.
That one won't come open, huh? So there were stokers. This is just like the Titanic.
Yeah. It's a little like the Titanic.
Yeah, but this was making steam, right?
It was. It made steam that went into radiators, were wrapped in tin and ducted to the upper floors. And just through gravity, there were no fans, no blowers, just through gravity, the heat found the rooms.
So how do you heat it now?
Well, come on in the boiler room.
A new boiler room. Ah, it's toasty in here. Oh yeah, I'm familiar with these. Now, are you saying that you've got 3 little boilers like this for the whole 106 rooms?
Right. The idea is that we have 9 total boilers when the building is complete.
Okay.
And the idea was to really put normal house-sized boilers in the house so people can work on them, and maintenance issues are easy.
That's interesting. Instead of a big industrial or commercial kind of installation, you've got normal boilers. And if you've got any kind of a breakdown, anybody can come. You probably know how to do some of the repairs yourself.
We do. And the other idea was to put each room on its own zone, so we have a lot of control in the house. And I think that's really been more infrastructure in the beginning, but it's really been worthwhile in the long run.
Bob, what about fire safety? A lot of these huge old palaces just kind of went up in flames in the last 20, 30 years.
It's a great concern of ours. We've completely made this room so it's airtight. And in addition, we only take in a certain volume of air for each boiler through these machines right here. Any sign of fire, excessive heat, smoke, the boilers shut down, sprinklers come on, and the room shuts down.
So there's no more air for combustion?
There's no more air for combustion.
Sounds like you thought about all of it. Thanks, Bob. Coming up next, we'll visit the restored library here at Elm Court. And it's a good thing you've got that heating plant, Bob, because you've got some large spaces to heat. Hi, Sonia.
Hi,
Now, what size do you suppose this room really is?
It's about 28 by 35.
Funny, I would have guessed more. And of course, when you got here, you had to sort of start from scratch, because like all of the other interiors, it had been vandalized and ruined.
Completely, actually.
How did you get to deciding, you know, color scheme, for example? You've got kind of like a gold ceiling and a beautiful blue on all the paneling. And how do you pick the colors?
Thanks. For the entire house, actually, we really like to choose all of the colors and the textiles and furnishings from historical palettes so that they are accurate to the era, but at the same time, it has our own personal preference in it, so it's comfortable as our home.
Mm-hmm. And this one was based, Sonia picked all the colors off of this rug, which has been here for, actually not that long, it hasn't been here at all, which was actually put into storage in the 50s.
It's hard to keep the history of all this straight, isn't it?
It is. It was in 57, it was put into storage by my grandfather and monthly taken care of. And then it came back to the house. And when we rolled it out, we realized it's about 8 feet too long.
So it didn't originally belong in this room.
It wasn't. It actually was.
Is out.
Yeah, it's folded over, but it actually was in a house on Fifth Avenue that was in the family, which is now Bergdorf Goodman's. But nonetheless, we're happy to have it here.
It's hard to keep track of all this, but the house that belonged to other ancestors of yours by the name of Vanderbilt is now the Bergdorf Goodman department store.
That's correct.
On Fifth Avenue. And this rug originally wasn't there.
Yes.
And it's a little bit too big for this room, but boy, it is, of course, where you got the color scheme, and it is, did you say it was Chinese?
Yes, it is. It is indeed. And it's from the W.J. Sloan Company.
Yeah, the W.J. Sloan Company was my great-great-grandfather who built the house with his wife, Emily. They had a furniture company that was started by his father, W.J. Sloan and Company. And all of the furniture at the time was made for the house and for specific spots.
Excellent. What about something like the bear rug? I mean, who shot the bear?
I wish in many ways that it was like days of old when we would go out into the bush ourselves and take one out. We were too busy having children. And so we actually got this one from Canada. As Sonia always says, you need to have a house. You need to have a bear like that in a house like this.
Is it
Yes, it's very Victorian.
Is it a grizzly?
It is a grizzly.
It is a grizzly bear. Wonderful. No, it is the kind of thing that you would expect to have in a grand library like this. With the baronial fireplaces, the candle. Oh my gosh, that's the biggest sofa I think I've ever looked at. Yeah. That's got to be a 10 or 12 foot white sofa.
It is. It was also original to the house and was put into storage for another piece that was in storage in the basement of my grandparents' house.
Now, what about the architectural detailing of the room? Because obviously it was built as a library. It's bookshelves on all 3 major walls, 4. Was this vandalized? Is it in pretty good condition? What gives?
Much of the woodwork was in pretty good condition. I think one of the things that was most interesting to us in the room is that all of the swags and all of the intricate detail of the room was made out of wood. There's no plaster in the room at all.
So even the cornice molding with the leaves carved into it and stuff, that's all carved wood?
All carved
all
wood.
the acanthus leaf. And in the other rooms where we had more plaster, we seemed to sustain more vandalism and damage. It was easier, indeed, to destroy.
Now, what do you suppose was the original finish on the wood? Would it have been natural wood?
It was actually, this house was always painted. Interestingly enough, there are a lot of different woods that are utilized throughout the house, and it went in and out of vogue during the Victorian era to have painted and unpainted wood. And this house, during the time that it was constructed, was indeed during the painted wood segment.
So it was always meant to have a coat of paint on it?
Always.
Yeah.
And they redecorated this room about 7 times. And I think that part of that was from the seasonality of the house. You could leave in the winter. It was only a summer house, so that construction could be going on nonstop, and then you come back and it's a new place.
It's redecorated.
And full changes, too. Coffered ceilings to plaster, to just full changes. Yeah.
Was the conservatory something that you've added on? It looks like it's brand new.
Well, it's had a lot of work. Because of its exposure to elements on so many sides, it was actually in very, very bad condition. But it is original to the house. And it's a wonderful spot. You know, we overlook there the Berkshire Hills and the Lake Stockbridge Bowl. And so it really is quite a therapeutic area.
And when we do have brides who get married in the building, many are drawn to that room and have ceremonies in that room.
Because you have restored it as probably one of the greatest bed and breakfast operations in the Berkshires. Well, we'll see more of the house in weeks to come. We're running out of time. Come home again next time. Till then, I'm Bob Vila. It's good to have you home again. Looking for help on your next project? Visit bobvila.com for everything you need to get the job done right. You'll find Home Again highlights, interactive tools for planning your next project, and helpful how-to articles for every room in your home. bobvila.com, the ultimate home site.